He laughed in her face and said, "Translate this and I'll give your mom my job." But when the little black girl opened her mouth and spoke perfect Japanese, that laugh disappeared real quick. The first thing you heard that morning was the squeak of Evelyn's old Honda pulling into the back parking lot of the Riverside Grand Hotel in Austin, Texas. The car rattled as it came to a stop, coughing out a final tired sigh before the engine died. Inside sat Evelyn, early 40s, hair tied back in a loose bun, wearing her faded uniform that had seen far better days. In the passenger seat, her daughter, Amaya, was half asleep with her backpack hugged to her chest. "Come on, baby," Evelyn whispered, brushing her fingers across Amaya's cheek. "We can't be late again. Mrs. Donnelly's already mad at me from last week." Amaya blinked awake, rubbing her eyes. "I'm coming, Mama." They stepped out into the cool morning air. The hotel towered above them, all glass and gold, reflecting the early sunlight. It looked like a building from another world. Evelyn stared up for a moment. Every time she worked here, that sight reminded her how far apart rich and poor could really live, even in the same city. Inside the service entrance, the hallway smelled faintly of bleach and carpet cleaner. Evelyn clocked in, tied her apron, and slipped on her gloves. She was supposed to clean the presidential suite, a rare assignment for her. Most days, she scrubbed the regular guest floors or vacuumed conference rooms, but her supervisor said the billionaire staying there wanted a deep clean before his meeting. "You sure it's okay I sit in the corner?" Amaya asked softly, tugging her mother's sleeve as they walked toward the elevators. Evelyn smiled. "Long as you stay quiet and keep to your drawing, nobody'll even know you're there. I just need to finish before noon." Amaya nodded, clutching her sketchpad. She was always quiet, an observer, watching everything with those curious eyes. When they reached the top floor, the doors opened to plush carpet and silence. The presidential suite stretched across the entire wing. The hallway lights reflected off polished marble, and Evelyn could already smell expensive cologne lingering near the door. She hesitated for a moment before knocking. A deep voice barked from inside. Come in. You're late." She swallowed. "Sorry, sir." The elevator stopped for room service. "I don't need excuses," the voice cut her off. When she stepped inside, her shoes sank into thick beige carpet. The room looked like something out of a magazine, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, velvet couches, and a dining table scattered with papers, open laptops, and crystal glasses. The man at the center of it all was Richard Hanover, the billionaire tech investor everyone at the hotel whispered about. He sat in a tailored navy suit, eyes glued to his phone. Two assistants hovered nearby, one typing rapidly, the other organizing folders. The man barely looked up when Evelyn entered. "You're the cleaner?" he asked without emotion. "Yes, sir," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. He gave a quick, uninterested nod. "Fine. Just don't touch the documents on that desk. And someone left me a note in Japanese I can't read. Been trying to get a translation all morning." He motioned toward the piece of paper, shaking his head with frustration. "You'd think for what I pay these people, someone would speak more than one language." Evelyn said nothing. She started unpacking her supplies, moving quietly. Amaya settled in the corner, opening her sketchbook and pretending not to listen. Hanover's phone buzzed and his tone shifted, sharp, impatient. "No, I said Tokyo time. I don't care if it's 2 a.m. there. Get them on the line." He ended the call with a mutter, tossing his phone onto the couch. His assistants exchanged nervous glances. Evelyn wiped the glass table, careful not to disturb the documents. But the tension in the room was heavy. Every few minutes, Hanover would sigh or complain under his breath. When she moved near the desk, her eyes landed on the piece of paper he mentioned. Elegant black ink covered it, Japanese characters neatly written. She didn't recognize a single word, but something about it looked peaceful, almost artistic. Hanover noticed her glance and smirked. "Don't bother trying to read it," he said. "It's from one of my Japanese partners. Probably some apology for being late again." He leaned back in his chair. "I don't expect you to understand." Most people wouldn't. Evelyn pressed her lips together. She wasn't sure what to say, but before she could look away, Amaya whispered from the corner, "That's not an apology, Mama." Everyone turned. Hanover raised an eyebrow. "What did you just say?" Amaya froze, her small voice barely carried across the room. "It's not an apology." But before anyone could speak again, Hanover leaned forward, his expression turning from surprise to disbelief, like he couldn't believe this child was correcting him. Richard Hanover blinked slowly, then let out a sharp laugh. Wait, did she just say it's not an apology? One of his assistants, a younger man with slicked back hair, snorted. Yeah, that's what it sounded like. Evelyn's face turned red. She stepped forward quickly, putting a gentle hand on Amaya's shoulder. I'm sorry, sir. She didn't mean any disrespect. My daughter just... Hanover held up a hand. Relax, I'm not mad. He studied Amaya like someone might study an odd animal at the zoo. You think you know what that says, huh? Amaya looked up, nervous but steady. I think so, yes. He chuckled again, turning to his assistants. Well, this should be good. Go ahead, kid. What does it say? Evelyn whispered. Amaya, honey, let's not... But Amaya's small hand gripped her mom's apron. It says something about a delivery being delayed because of customs, and that the meeting has been moved to Saturday, 10 o'clock. The room went silent. One of the assistants' eyes widened. Sir, that's almost exactly what your translator texted me earlier. The shipment delay from Tokyo Hanover's smile faded for a second, but he quickly recovered. Oh, come on. She could have guessed that. It's not like that's hard to figure out. Evelyn sighed quietly, ready to move on, but Hanover wasn't done. He leaned back, watching them both. You know, that's cute. I'll give her that. But let's not pretend she actually speaks Japanese. People love pretending they're smarter than they are. The comment stung. Evelyn forced herself to stay calm. Sir, we really should finish cleaning. I don't want to interrupt your work. Hanover ignored her. So where'd you two learn your little tricks, huh? You watch those anime shows, pick up a few words, and suddenly you're bilingual? The assistants chuckled again. Evelyn clenched her jaw but said nothing. She had learned long ago that arguing with people like this never went anywhere good. Amaya glanced between them, her fingers tightening around her pencil. It's not a trick, she said softly. I've been studying for 3 years. 3 years? Hanover repeated, sounding amused. What are you, 10? Amaya nodded. He smirked, glancing at his assistants. 3 years, right. Next you'll tell me you can negotiate a business deal too. Evelyn straightened, finally speaking up. Sir, please. She didn't mean to interrupt you. She just likes languages. It's something she's proud of. Hanover waved her off. Relax, I'm just having a little fun. You know what? Let's make this interesting. He stood, picking up the paper and holding it out between 2 fingers. Tell you what, translate this whole thing for me right now. If you get it right. His smile turned sharp. I'll give your mom my job. His assistants burst out laughing. Evelyn froze, heart pounding. That's enough, she said, her voice shaking. That's not funny. Oh, I'm dead serious, Hanover replied. You said she's proud of it, right? Let's see what she's got. He glanced at the girl again. Come on, little genius. Show us how smart you are. The air grew heavy. Amaya looked at her mom. Evelyn shook her head slightly, whispering, Don't worry about it, sweetheart. Just sit down. But Amaya didn't move. Something in her expression had changed. A quiet courage, the kind that only shows up when someone's tired of being laughed at. She walked forward slowly, stopping beside the billionaire. The paper shook slightly in her small hands, but her voice was steady. You shouldn't talk to my mom like that, she said. She works hard. She's not dumb. Hanover blinked, caught off guard. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Then he smirked again. You've got some attitude, I'll give you that. But go on, translate. Let's see if you actually know what you're talking about. Amaya took a deep breath, eyes scanning the paper carefully. Then in clear, confident Japanese, she began to read aloud. Her voice filled the room, smooth, deliberate, and shockingly fluent. The assistants exchanged glances, mouths slightly open. Even Hanover's posture changed. The smug amusement started to fade from his face. When Amaya finished reading, she looked up and calmly translated it into English, word for word. It says the meeting with Mr. Ito was rescheduled because his flight was delayed in Osaka. They're requesting confirmation for Saturday, 10 o'clock, and they apologize for the inconvenience. Silence. Only the distant hum of the city outside the windows. Hanover blinked, once, twice. Then he turned to his assistant. Check the email from Ito's office. The assistant opened his laptop, typed quickly, and froze. Sir? That's exactly what it says. Hanover looked back at the girl, then at Evelyn, who stood there with her hands pressed against her cleaning cart, trying not to cry. "I told you," Amaya whispered, eyes steady. "It wasn't an apology." But instead of admitting he was wrong, Hanover gave a tight smile, the kind that hides embarrassment behind arrogance. And that's when the energy in the room started to shift in a way no one saw coming. For a moment, nobody said a word. The room felt thick with something no one wanted to name: shame. Hanover's assistants avoided eye contact, pretending to look busy. Evelyn stood frozen, her heart pounding, unsure if she should apologize or walk out right then and there. Hanover cleared his throat, forcing a chuckle that sounded painfully forced. "Well," he said, looking at Amaya, "I guess you got me there." He clapped his hands once, sharply. "Good job, kid." Maybe you've got a future in translation. Maybe Evelyn could hear the sarcasm buried in his tone. She tried to steer the conversation back to neutral ground. "Sir, if you'd like, we can finish cleaning and let you get back to work." But Hanover interrupted her again. No. I'm actually curious now." He turned to his assistants, grinning. "You see that? 10 years old, fluent in Japanese. Maybe we should put her on payroll. What do you think?" The younger assistant gave a half smile. "Sure, boss. We could use someone that smart." They laughed. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. Enough to make Evelyn's face burn and Amaya's eyes drop toward the floor. "Don't listen to them, honey," Evelyn said softly. "They don't mean it." Hanover raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I mean it. I mean, come on. What are the odds? A little girl from—" He paused, glancing at the worn name tag on Evelyn's uniform. "East Austin, right? Fluent in Japanese. Yeah, that's believable." His words cut like glass. Amaya looked up at him. "I learned online," she said quietly. "There are free classes, videos too. You don't have to be rich to learn." Her tone was respectful, but it carried something fierce beneath it, something proud. Hanover laughed again, but it didn't sound natural anymore. "Free classes? Sweetheart, you don't learn Japanese from YouTube videos. That's not how it works." Evelyn's hands tightened around the handle of her cleaning cart. "She worked hard," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "Every night after homework, she'd watch lessons. Sometimes I'd come home from the late shift and find her practicing by herself. It's all her." Hanover tilted his head, his smile thin. "You sound defensive." "I sound like a mother," Evelyn replied. That stopped him, for just a second. He studied her, then looked back at Amaya. "So, what's the end goal, huh? You planning to move to Japan one day? Work for a big company? Marry rich?" The assistants laughed again, though this time even they seemed a little uneasy. Amaya blinked, clearly unsure how to respond. "No, sir. I just like learning things, and I wanted to read manga without subtitles." Her honesty disarmed the room for a moment. Even Hanover had to look away, covering a half smile. "Well, that's refreshingly simple." He turned to pour himself a drink from a crystal decanter on the side table. The clink of the glass broke the silence. "You know," he said, swirling the amber liquid, "it's funny how people from nothing always want to prove they're something. Like it's a competition." Evelyn took a deep breath, swallowing the sting of his words. "I don't want to prove anything," she said. "I just want to give my daughter a chance to be more than what people expect." Hanover looked at her over his glass. "And what do people expect exactly?" She met his eyes for the first time. "That we stay quiet. That we clean up your messes and disappear before you even notice." The assistants shifted uncomfortably. Hanover's smirk faltered for the first time. Then Amaya spoke again, softly but with conviction. "Mama always says, learning is how you make people listen, even if they don't want to." The billionaire set down his drink, his expression unreadable. For a brief second, he almost looked human. "That's a nice thought," he said quietly. "A little naive, maybe, but nice." He turned toward the window, watching the skyline outside. The sunlight hit the glass towers, blinding and golden. "You know," he said after a pause, "when I was your age, I didn't care about any of that. I just wanted money and power. Guess I got both. But sometimes—" He stopped himself, cutting off the thought. Evelyn waited, sensing something behind his tone. But then, just as quickly, the arrogance slipped back into place. He chuckled. "Anyway, congratulations, little translator. You won the challenge. Your mom doesn't get my job, though. Sorry, that part was a joke. He grinned at his assistants again. Evelyn's shoulders slumped. Thank you for your time, sir. We'll finish up and leave. Hanover waved a hand dismissively. Sure. Just don't touch my papers. They turned back to their work, cleaning quietly while the room filled with nothing but the sound of footsteps and distant city traffic. But behind Hanover's calm exterior, something had shifted. He couldn't shake the image of that little girl standing up for her mother, calm, proud, unbothered by his wealth. It bothered him more than he wanted to admit. But just as Evelyn was about to pack up her supplies and leave the room, one of Hanover's assistants muttered something under his breath. And that's when everything took a turn no one expected. Evelyn was crouched near the coffee table, packing her rags and brushes into the cart, when she heard it. A whisper, low but sharp enough to cut. Yeah, fluent in Japanese. Sure, the younger assistant mumbled. Probably memorized a TikTok clip. Hanover didn't respond, but Evelyn saw the faint smirk tug at his lips again. That was it. Something inside her snapped. She'd been quiet all morning, swallowing her pride, letting every comment slide. But that last one hurt differently. She stood up slowly, her voice calm but trembling. You know, sir, I've cleaned this hotel for almost 8 years. I've met all kinds of people, rich, poor, tourists, politicians, and I've never once seen someone as proud of being small as you are right now. Hanover turned, eyebrows lifting. Excuse me? Evelyn met his stare. You heard me. His assistants froze, unsure what to do. You think because you've got money, you can talk down to people like me, she continued. But what you don't see is that you're standing in this spotless room because someone like me came in before sunrise to make it that way. You don't even see us, but you depend on us. For a few seconds, no one breathed. Then Hanover let out a quiet laugh. You've got some nerve. You really do, but you might want to be careful how you talk to the person who signs your paycheck. I don't work for you, Evelyn said. I work for the hotel. You just rented the room. The older assistant whispered, Sir, maybe we should… But before he could finish, Amaya stepped forward again. Her voice was soft but steady, cutting through the tension like a knife. She's right, she said. You shouldn't talk to my mom like that. Hanover's jaw tightened. You're a bold little kid, you know that? Amaya looked up at him without flinching. Mama says people who look down on others are really just scared. Hanover blinked. Scared? Of what? Amaya shrugged. Of being kind. Of not being the biggest person in the room. For the first time, the billionaire didn't have a comeback. The words landed heavier than anyone expected. Even his assistants stopped pretending to work. Hanover turned away, walking toward the window. The city stretched out below him. Towers of glass and steel, reflections of a world he'd conquered. But at that moment, it all felt smaller. He cleared his throat, speaking without turning around. So tell me something, Miss Translator. How did you even learn all that? You really expect me to believe a 10-year-old picked up Japanese from YouTube? Amaya didn't hesitate. Not just YouTube. Mama found me a website that had lessons. She used to work extra nights so we could pay for it. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. Amaya, but the little girl kept going. She'd get home after midnight and still help me practice hiragana on sticky notes. Sometimes she'd fall asleep sitting up, and I'd keep reading until I got it right. One of the assistants looked down, pretending to check his watch. The other shifted awkwardly. Hanover finally turned around. His face had changed. Softer now, though his pride fought to hide it. Your mom did all that for you? Amaya nodded. She says learning is like planting a tree. You don't see it grow at first, but one day it gives you shade. That hit harder than she knew. Hanover glanced at Evelyn, really looked at her for the first time. There were faint lines around her eyes, traces of exhaustion and strength all at once. Her hands, still gloved, were trembling slightly from emotion she was trying to contain. He walked back toward the desk and picked up the paper again. So you really understood this, he said quietly. Every word? Amaya nodded again. Yes, sir. He gave a slow exhale, then looked at his assistants. Leave us for a minute. They exchanged a look but obeyed, stepping out into the hallway. When the door clicked shut, Hanover set the paper back on the desk and leaned against it, staring at the two of them. You know, he said, people always talk about how the world isn't fair, but most of the time they just sit around complaining about it. You two, you actually did something. Evelyn didn't answer. She wasn't sure if it was a compliment or another backhanded remark. Hanover's gaze drifted toward Amaya again. You remind me of myself at your age. Except I didn't have anyone teaching me to care about anything. I just wanted more, always more. Didn't matter who I stepped on to get it. His tone cracked slightly. It surprised even him. He looked at Evelyn. Do you know how much I make in a year? Evelyn hesitated. I don't need to know that. 8 figures, he said flatly. But the funny thing is, I haven't talked to my own son in 3 years. He hates me, says I care more about money than people. Maybe he's right. The room fell silent again. Amaya took a small step closer. You could call him, she said. Hanover smiled faintly. Maybe, but I doubt he wants to hear from me. Evelyn spoke softly. People always want to be heard. Sometimes they just need a reason to believe it's real. Hanover studied her face, the sincerity in it, the quiet dignity. Something inside him shifted again, something small but real. He rubbed a hand across his face, letting out a long sigh. I owe you both an apology, he said finally. That was out of line. Evelyn blinked. You don't have to. No, he interrupted. I do. He turned to Amaya. You're an impressive kid. Smarter than most people I've met in boardrooms. He gave a small laugh, shaking his head. And you're raising her right. Evelyn felt her eyes well up but fought to stay composed. Hanover picked up the Japanese note one last time, folded it neatly, and set it back down. You just reminded me that money doesn't teach you anything about character. I used to think success made people smarter. I was wrong. Turns out, humility does. He walked over to a side table, grabbed a small business card, and handed it to Evelyn. There's a number on the back. Call it tomorrow. It's my office assistant. I want to set up something for your daughter. Maybe a scholarship fund. She shouldn't have to wait until she's grown to do something great. Evelyn stared at the card, speechless. Thank you, but you don't have to. I want to, he said. Let's call it me finally doing one thing right. Amaya smiled shyly. Thank you, Mr. Hanover. He smiled back, and for once it wasn't smug or forced. It was real. But as Evelyn looked down at the business card, part of her couldn't help wondering if this was just a wealthy man's guilt talking, or if maybe, just maybe, he'd actually been changed by what happened in that room. After Hanover's assistants returned, the atmosphere in the suite had completely changed. The arrogance that once filled the room had faded, replaced by an awkward quiet. Evelyn continued cleaning, her movements slower, more thoughtful. Hanover sat back down, but this time his eyes weren't on his phone. They were on Amaya, the little girl who had just stripped away his ego with nothing but grace and fluency. You really taught yourself Japanese? One of the assistants asked, half smiling now, the condescension gone. Amaya nodded. It started when I was 7. Mama brought home an old tablet someone left in the lost and found at work. She said the owner never came back for it, so they let her keep it. I found an app that showed Japanese cartoons with subtitles. I just wanted to understand what they were saying. Hanover listened quietly, his hands clasped. Evelyn spoke softly. She used to draw the characters on sticky notes and tape them all over our apartment. On the fridge, the mirrors, the doors. Every night after work, I'd walk in, and there'd be more of them. I couldn't even open the bathroom door without seeing hiragana written on it. Amaya laughed a little. You used to trip over the flashcards in the hallway. I did, Evelyn said, smiling. And when I asked why she didn't just learn Spanish like the other kids, she said, because no one expects me to know Japanese. That made Hanover smile too, faintly. Evelyn's voice softened. We didn't have much. Still don't. I work 2 jobs, sometimes 3. The only time we see each other is in the morning before school or at night when I get home. But she never complains. She just keeps going, keeps learning. I told her that if she stayed curious, she'd always have choices. And if she had choices, nobody could ever make her feel small. Her words hung in the air like something sacred. Even the assistants seemed moved. Hanover leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You sound like a teacher. he said. Evelyn chuckled softly. I wanted to be one. But life had other plans. My husband left when Amaya was 4, and I had to figure out how to keep us afloat. The dream got replaced by whatever paid the rent. Hanover nodded slowly, his expression pensive. I get that. Life changes your map without asking for permission. Amaya tilted her head. You wanted to be something else too? Hanover hesitated, then smiled faintly. A pilot. When I was a kid, I'd sneak onto rooftops just to watch planes take off. I thought it looked like freedom. But when my dad died, I had to help my mom pay the bills. Ended up building a business instead. Amaya's eyes lit up. But you still could. You're rich. You can learn to fly now. He laughed quietly. You know, I could. But maybe there's more to learn down here first. Evelyn glanced up from her mop, meeting his eyes. Maybe that's what growing up really is. Realizing you don't have to chase the sky to find peace. He nodded. Maybe you're right. The moment lingered. The sound of distant city traffic seeped through the windows, grounding them in reality again. Hanover stood, adjusting his jacket. I'm having dinner with my board tonight, he said, looking at Amaya. You like sushi? Amaya's eyes widened. Yes, sir. Well, the chef here is from Tokyo. I'll tell him to make something special for you and your mom. Room service. My treat. Evelyn blinked. Sir, that's too much. It's not, he interrupted gently. It's gratitude. Amaya grinned. Thank you, Mr. Hanover. Hanover smiled back. Call me Richard. And keep learning, okay? Don't ever stop. The world's a lot bigger than people like me make it seem. Amaya nodded, clutching her sketchbook to her chest. I won't. He watched them pack up their supplies, still shaken by how much a few words from a child had done to him. But as Evelyn pushed the cart out of the suite, she couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said, and what might actually come from that folded business card in her pocket. The next morning, the Riverside Grand Hotel felt unusually quiet. Evelyn arrived early again, though this time she walked a little slower. She hadn't slept much, not because of exhaustion, but because she kept replaying what happened in that suite. The arrogance, the challenge, the apology, and then that business card now tucked inside her purse like it was made of gold. Amaya skipped beside her, humming softly. Do you think he meant it, Mama? About the scholarship? Evelyn smiled faintly. I don't know, baby. People say a lot of things when they feel sorry, but he didn't sound sorry, Amaya said. He sounded real. They reached the employee elevator. As the doors closed, Evelyn glanced down at her reflection in the mirrored walls. The tired eyes, the faint smile. Maybe you're right, she whispered. When they stepped out on the top floor, something unusual was waiting. A man in a dark suit, not one of the assistants from before, stood outside the suite with a folder in hand. Mrs. Carter? He asked politely. Evelyn blinked. Yes? I'm with Mr. Hanover's office. He asked me to deliver this. He handed her the folder and a sealed envelope. He said to tell you it's not charity. It's an investment. Then he nodded and walked away before she could even respond. Inside the folder was a printed letter with Hanover's signature at the bottom. Evelyn read it slowly, her voice trembling as she spoke aloud for Amaya. Enclosed, you'll find a full scholarship offer for Amaya Carter, covering tuition and materials for a private language academy in Austin. You'll also find a contact for a mentor in Tokyo who has agreed to meet her virtually once a week. Consider this a promise, not pity. You both taught me something I can't forget. Amaya gasped. Mama, that means... Evelyn covered her mouth, tears spilling before she could stop them. It means he really did it. Amaya threw her arms around her mother, and for a moment, the weight of all those years, the exhaustion, the double shifts, the skipped meals, melted into something light and beautiful. Later that afternoon, when Evelyn went to clean the suite one last time, she found Hanover standing by the window, his jacket off, sleeves rolled up. He looked different, not just in appearance, but in presence. He turned as she entered. I was hoping I'd see you, he said. Did you get the folder? I did, she replied. You didn't have to do that. I know, he said simply, but I wanted to. Evelyn hesitated. Why? Hanover looked out at the city again, his voice quieter now. Because I realized something. I've spent my life proving I'm better than people, Smarter, faster, richer. But yesterday, a 10-year-old reminded me that wisdom doesn't come from winning. It comes from listening. He turned back to her. You raised her well. You gave her something money can't buy. Evelyn smiled softly. Hope? He nodded. Exactly. There was a long silence, not awkward this time, but meaningful. Then he said, I called my son last night. Evelyn's eyebrows lifted. You did? He nodded. First time in 3 years. It wasn't perfect. We argued. But he stayed on the phone. I think that's a start. That's more than a start, she said. That's the first step back. He smiled faintly. You're right. Amaya peeked in from the hallway, shyly clutching a small origami crane she had folded from one of the hotel's napkins. She walked up to Hanover and held it out to him. What's this? He asked. It's a crane, she said. It means peace and luck. In Japan, they say if you make 1,000, your wish comes true. I only made 1, but maybe it'll still work. Hanover took the crane carefully, his expression soft. Thank you, Amaya. I think 1 might be enough. She smiled wide. I hope your wish comes true, Mr. Hanover. He looked down at the crane, then back at her. It already has. But as they left that suite for the last time, Evelyn couldn't help but feel that something bigger had changed. Not just for them, but for him too. The man who once mocked her now stood quietly, holding a paper crane, learning what respect really meant. Weeks later, life hadn't magically transformed. Evelyn still woke up before dawn, still cleaned rooms, still fought to stretch every paycheck. But something inside her had shifted. When Amaya came home from school, she'd sit by the window with her laptop, joining her new online lessons through the scholarship Hanover had set up. The sound of Japanese words filled their tiny apartment like music, reminding Evelyn that even small spaces can hold big dreams. Sometimes, after Amaya finished studying, they'd talk about that day in the hotel. Not about the embarrassment or the anger, but about the moment everything changed, when one act of courage forced someone powerful to see people differently. Amaya would say, Mama, do you think he really changed? And Evelyn would smile. People don't always change overnight, baby. But sometimes, one moment makes them look at themselves for the first time in years. That's where it starts. One evening, a small package arrived at their door. No return address, just a sleek black box with their names written in clean handwriting. Inside was a handwritten note from Hanover. For Amaya, the first person to teach me something money couldn't buy. Keep learning, kid. The world's bigger than you think. Beneath the note sat a silver keychain shaped like an airplane. Amaya laughed. He remembered. Evelyn smiled. Looks like he's learning to fly after all. She slipped the keychain into her daughter's palm. You keep this, baby. As a reminder, never let anyone tell you where you belong. You decide that Amaya hugged her tight. I will, Mama. Outside, the city lights flickered on. Small, distant stars reflected in glass and pavement. But inside that apartment, something shined brighter. Faith. Faith that hard work, kindness, and self-worth meant more than any title or paycheck ever could. Because respect isn't given to those who demand it. It's earned by those who live it. And if this story taught you anything, let it be this. Never underestimate where greatness can come from. Sometimes the person you look down on is the very one who will open your eyes. If this touched your heart, share it. Tell someone about Evelyn and Amaya, because you never know. The right story at the right moment might just change someone's life.